Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Episode 13 of season 2 of the HoopTalk podcast. This is the first time ever you've seen our faces twice in the same week on this channel. So, shout out to everyone who was here on Wednesday for our first ever episode of reacting to NBA takes. But today we are back regularly scheduled programming with our NBA All-Stars. As we know, the NBA All-Star starters were announced just this past week. I had some takes on it. I'm sure John D had some takes on it. But here we're going to give what we believe should be the all-star starters, bench, wild cards, all of the above. And I want to ask before we get into this, John, are you giving people legacy all-stars or are we going off how well these guys are playing? I think that's the important question.
I didn't give legacy all-stars as far as like, oh, these guys are starters, like I didn't have the big three in my starting lineup just because they're the big three. But especially for like the backcourt for the West, I don't think it's been so significant to where some of these guys just can't be on the list. So they're definitely in here, but they're not like, oh, they've clearly been to the level that they have been in previous years. So
yeah, not to spoil anything. I may or may not have them, but this was solely based on the merit of how well I think they are playing. So it's not a prediction of who I think the All-Stars are going to be. This is, if it was up to me and I could pick the 4 best Western Conference guards and the 4 best Eastern Conference guards, and then the 6 best Eastern and Western Conference frontcourt players with the other 2 next best players in each conference, how would the All-Star game look to me? That's entirely what this was. So with that being said, I think we start with who are your toughest cuts?
I think I'm gonna make a lot of people upset here. It's pretty much hard to deny when you look at the box score. I cut LaMelo Ball, and it's just tough because this year we've gotten such an amazing amount of backcourt players in the Eastern Conference. And then I added on top of, I think these guys kind of impact winning just a little bit more than LaMelo does. That's why I had to cut them. Like, we've gotten an extremely good year from Darius Garland. We've gotten a great year from Cade Cunningham. We've gotten a great season from Trae Young. And I don't think the gap is as big enough that LaMelo's putting out for me to have him on my team. Now, if this wasn't guard, 2 guards, 3 front court, I think I would have made a case for LaMelo, but I just think there are way too many guards to say that he could have made it.
LaMelo, as we all know, was number 1 in fan voting for Eastern Conference guards. So you not having him, and I know there's a lot of fans who are not going to be happy with you. So I'm gonna just stay here and co-sign. Yeah, I didn't have LaMelo on my All-Star ballot.
See, I thought I was crazy. Thank God.
And the crazy thing is, I'm not going to say who I have, but I do have 6 guards. So, LaMelo didn't make it for me.
I got
it was tough. It was between him and one other person. I ended up favoring them. I think just overall in terms of playmaking, I'm trying not to spoil who it is, but I think they have played better than LaMelo. And I also factored in the time missed of injury, which I think if Melo played as many games as everyone else above him, I probably would have had him, because I think when you look at what LaMelo's doing, particularly from like a scoring volume standpoint, the offensive load he has is like well over 60. It's like one of the highest offensive loads we've seen since like James Harden and Russell Westbrook. He's really carrying the Charlotte offense. He's doing so, averaging about 29 points. The efficiency isn't terrible. It's not great, but when you consider the situation, I'm not really mad at him for the efficiency. He's still a really good passer, still a really good playmaker. Defensively, I think he's been just flat out bad, but it was a tough cut for me, like a really, really tough cut that I was debating it like for, I want to say like 20 minutes who I'd favor, but I ultimately just went with LaMelo not making it. But I do think if there is an injury, I do think he would be my first injury replacement.
Yeah, 100%.
So he's my 13th Eastern Conference All-Star. Do you have any other tough cuts?
I have a lot because we've gotten a really good season out of a lot of players. The first guy I want to talk about is Tyler Hero. I've been pretty vocal about my really just keying in on Tyler Hero's game and watching the improvement. I think he's really adjusted his game towards the analytics, where he's taking a lot more drives to the rim. He's taking a lot more 3-pointers. He's been extremely efficient. He's passing the ball a lot more. And he's been the best player for the Miami Heat on top of them having all the Jimmy Butler situations going on. So I think Tyler Hero it has been playing really good this season. I think it's about 24, 5-5, about 63% true shooting. I think he's been great. So Tyler Hero is a tough cut, but once again, there's just so much talent in the NBA now to where Tyler Hero is going to be a shock to make an all-star appearance over the next few years, barring any injury. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna ask. Do you think the All-Star game should go up to 15 players per team, considering
100%.
the way the talent has improved?
100%. Because we're gonna have fan bases like if LaMelo doesn't play this All-Star game, there's gonna be a riot. There's gonna be a riot. There's gonna be. I know it is. I know it is. But a few people I just want to go ahead and put out there that will not be seeing this list just due to injury and games played. Paulo, Franz, Luka, Joel Embiid, those guys will not be on my list. They just have not played enough to me for me to really validate them being on this list enough. So I just took a lot of guys who've been a lot more available. So another cut I have is Jalen Williams. I think Jalen Williams started off the season really well. I think he was averaging about 21 to 22 points per game. The shot was falling. It looked like he was getting to his spots a lot easier. And he was extremely versatile defensively to where he was playing some 5 minutes and playing the 5 role defensively when Isaiah Hartenstein and Chet Holmgren were out. But lately, we started to see that concern because a thing I've had with Jalen Williams is in playoff setting, will he be able to get to his spots as easily against more athletic defenders, against better defenders? We're starting to see it a lot more. I think over the past month or so, or ever since the new calendar year, he's been below average in true shooting, just has not been able to create the easiest offense for himself. So that really pushed me away, especially with some of the front court talent that we have in the Western Conference. I just couldn't find a way to put him on this list.
Yeah, J-Dub was someone else. So far you haven't named anyone who I've had on either one of my All-Star teams. So we seemingly seem to be on the same page here. J-Dub, I think, just fell victim to the talent in the front court in the West. I mean, it's just really tough to make it.
Yeah.
And I think there was a period of time where the offensive, there was a regression at some point during the season, and you saw some of the concerns that I had in terms of self-creation, like you alluded to, start to rear their heads. And it's like the offense when Shai's not on the floor and J-Dub's having to shoulder it is really, really bad. But then he is playing like an all-league defender, so it's like I want to reward that. But when I look at the other forwards, I think it's kind of hard for me to get him in there. So he is someone who I unfortunately didn't have in there. And then I also want to just say, I have no Houston Rockets on my All-Star team.
Neither do I.
I know they are the 2 seed. I know they did just beat the Cleveland Cavaliers for the second time. The Cavs have lost 3 straight, by the way.
Yeah.
And I know Alperen Şengün has been the Rockets' most consistent player this year. I know Amen Thompson, since he's been a starter, has been a revelation. He's getting a lot of love nationally and by Houston fans. And I know Jalen Green has really started to turn things around, really since like late November, but in particular in January. I just don't think over the course of the season anyone's played at that all-star level. I think if you could make the case for anyone, it would be Alperen Şengün. But I look at the scoring efficiency is concerning, and then I look at just the way he plays in terms of he's this isolation big who's not the most efficient isolationist. He can't really shoot. The passing is nice in spurts, but then he still can't navigate double teams to the degree you'd want. And defensively, he's improved, but I mean, him and Jalen are still the worst defenders in the starting unit for the Rockets. And Jalen Green, just the first month of the season, just wasn't good enough to get him in here. And Amen Thompson, unfortunately, just didn't start playing heavy minutes until Jabari Smith went down. So he just is falling victim to the amount of time he's been out there. But I do think next season, I think the Rockets will have an all-star. Who it will be, I don't know. But I think next year, I do think they will have an all-star. It's just this year, not quite. But they are the 2 seeds, so I think they'll be all right with or without an all-star.
Just me being the basketball analyst that I am, I did make the rosters. I did draft my eight-man rosters, and we do have a Houston Rocket on the Rising Stars team. So that kind of just puts a little bit of healing on the wound, just a little bit. But yeah, man. I don't necessarily think Jalen Green should be an all-star after having a stretch where he was really bad to start the season. I think Alperen Sengun has been a little inconsistent for my liking, just to put him above some of the front court players I have in the Western Conference. I mean, this front court is just extremely talented. And Amen Thompson, like you alluded to, just hasn't been getting the minutes. And I do think sooner or later the Rockets are going to have all stars coming up. I think Jalen Green is going to improve. I think Alperen Sengun is going to improve, and I think Amen Thompson is going to find his way into the starting lineup sooner rather than later. Once everybody gets back healthy, and he's going to be a permanent starter. But yeah, I just couldn't look at the second seed and say one of these guys who are not all stars deserve to take somebody who has been playing at an all star level throughout the entire season just because they're a 2 seed. So yeah, I didn't have them on here as well. And the last guy that I cut was Devin Booker. Devin Booker did have a slow start to the season. It's looked like to start the season he was just really inconsistent. I would say, if I can pull the stats up real quick, I would like to say that he's starting to take a lot more threes within this new system with Mike Budenholzer, and I just don't really necessarily think that that's his game.
He's attempting 8 a game right now.
Yeah, attempting 8 a game. About, let's see, 41% of his shots are going to 3-pointers. That's almost plus 10 compared to last season. I just don't think that's his game. I think he works best in the mid-range, whether it's working out of the post, whether it's having that in-between game, just being extremely versatile inside the arc. And they've really just taken him away from that. Now, as of late, he has been playing better, but I don't think it was enough to really put him on this list.
Yeah, Devin Booker I was debating between him and the person I ultimately had as my final wild card. I favored the other person. Devin Booker just missed the cut. He would be my Western Conference first injury replacement.
Yeah.
It's just the league is just so talented. I feel like Devin Booker in most eras is just a walk-on all-star. And in this era, he's really struggling. He's only made 4 all-star teams in his career, and one was as an injury replacement, I believe, maybe even 2 of them. So it says a lot about the talent level in the NBA right now. But yeah, Devin Booker was my final cut for the NBA all-star team. Now, with that being said, I think we should get into the starting lineups, because that's easier than getting through the benches. So who do you have starting in the Western Conference?
My Western Conference starters are Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Anthony Edwards, Kevin Durant, Victor Wembanyama, and Nikola Jokic. I definitely think that Wemby has been playing to the level of an all-star this season. He had that amazing stretch earlier around December where he was averaging like 27 points per game, 10 rebounds, 5 assists. Think about 4.5 blocks. His pull-up shooting has gotten a lot better. His defense, he's obviously, in my opinion, a top 3 defender in the NBA. So, and the way he's impacted the San Antonio's team where they're a top defense with him on the floor and one of the worst defenses off, same could be said offensively. I think he just covers up a lot of gaps that the San Antonio Spurs team has at such a young age. I had to put him in the starting lineup. Kevin Durant, once again, throughout this season has been extremely efficient. He has been in and out of the lineup, but I just don't think, I think with his level of impact and the way he's been playing, he's been a top 10 player this season. He has been the defender that you would have wanted him to for this Phoenix Suns team. And he's just been extremely impactful for the Phoenix Suns that I would have to have him here. We all know about SGA and Jokic. These guys are top 2 in MVP voting. They're having some of the greatest seasons that we've seen in some recent years. And then Anthony Edwards, I think with his improvement to pull-up shooting, and I don't think we necessarily see this often. Like I can't think of like the level of improvement from a player to where this attribute has to get better for the team to improve. Like, if you understand what I'm saying, like, the Minnesota Timberwolves needed floor spacing. Anthony Edwards was going to have a tougher time driving to the rim without any Karl Anthony Towns. Jaden McDaniels can't shoot. Rudy Gobert isn't the best 3-point shooter. Julius Randle isn't the best 3-point shooter, and Rudy Gobert is a negative offensively all around. So just him being able to add that pull-up shooting to his game, I think he's like leading the league in points per pull-up 3-pointer. I think he has the most total 3-pointers this season. He was going to be my starter. And I know Steph is going to be the starter this season because it's in San Francisco. I didn't necessarily want to play into that narrative. I think Ant has been better, and I think Steph has been really inconsistent. Spoiler alert, he's still on my team, but I just couldn't put him in the starting lineup.
I think I'm gonna start by just saying SGA and Jokic. There you go. Just walk onto the starters. That was obvious. There was no really conversation there. I also went with Victor Wembanyama and Kevin Durant. Um, However, I did go with Steph Curry. Um, I played around with 3 different guards in that spot. Anthony Edwards being one of them. I ultimately went with Steph because I think the counting stats are down, but in terms of like offensive impact, I still think he's one of the top in the NBA.
Yeah,
I just think
100%.
I like you look at this Golden State offense when he's not on the floor, like they are just incompetent. And he is still driving good offense when he's out there. But now that I think about it, I don't know how confident I am in this. For reference, they do have a 119 offensive rating with him on the floor, and it falls down to a 105 without him. So like they very clearly just can't create anything when he's not out there. And his inconsistency, I think, in part is because of age and regression, but I also think it's in part because teams have figured out that in order to stop the Warriors, we just need to make sure Steph can't score 30. Really.
Yeah,
So
really.
he's seeing some of the most blitzes he's seen since 2021. And teams are practically daring everyone else not named Steph to beat them, and they quite frankly can't.
Yeah.
But in terms of Steph generating open looks for people, in terms of Steph still being able to be one of the best shooters in the league, in terms of Steph still being one of the most dynamic offensive weapons in the NBA, I think all of those things are still true. So I slightly favored Steph, not by much, but I did ultimately just go with Steph in that regard. And I want to say when it comes down to Kevin Durant, because Kevin Durant missed a lot of time, so I was hesitant. But I just think in the games he's been out there, Phoenix is just so much better. Offensively and defensively, I think he's their most important player.
Yeah.
This team really functions on both sides of the ball through him. He's being tasked with a lot more playmaking duties. He's being tasked with self-creation at a level that he hasn't really had to do in a while. And he's exceeding expectations. I can't say exceeding expectations. I don't know what people expect of him. He's exceeding my expectations in terms of what he could do at this age. And he's still one of the most efficient scorers in the NBA. 45% of his 2-pointers are assisted. That's the lowest rate of his career since his MVP year. So the offensive burden is really through the roof, and he's still just as efficient as, I guess ever. Currently, if you want to go just off raw splits, 52, 39, 83. So I guess he forgot to shoot free throws. And then defensively, I think he's been really, really good considering the Suns' big man situation prior to Nick Richards. He's been tasked with rim protection, switching, being the low man. Like he's doing a lot of things defensively, something that you wouldn't expect from someone of his age and his ilk in terms of what we know Kevin Durant to be. So I think just in terms of overall impact, despite playing maybe 8, 9 less games in his competition, I still do think he's done enough to warrant a starting spot for me. So that's why I went with KD in my starting lineup. And Wemby just, in my opinion, he's been the best defender in the league this year.
Yeah.
Offensively, I think the gravity he has, the way he's drawing to consistently, his playmaking has taken a huge leap. Offensively, I do think he's a really, really good offensive player in terms of creating for others, being a walking mismatch. He's making mid-range jumpers at a clip that is a lot better than last year. And the three-point shot has also improved. So he's just improved all around, despite the fact that he's shooting less at the rim than ever, but he's now even more efficient there as well. So I think Wemby's just become a really good offensive player while still being one of, if not the best defenders in basketball. And that for me was enough of a case to be an all-star starter. Now, I guess I got to ask, because was you battling between Anthony Edwards and Steph for the starting spot, or Anthony Edwards and someone else?
No, I was battling between Ant and Steph. No, trust me. Like, if I could show you my notebook, it's like crosses all through it. So So I was definitely fighting between Ant and Steph. I kind of looked at Kyrie for a second. I looked at De'Aaron Fox, but I think I just narrowed it down to Ant and Steph for the longest. So those were my 2 finalists for that second front backcourt spot.
Yeah, my issue with Ant is, well, in comparison to Steph, is I just don't think like he has the same offensive impact.
Yeah.
Like I know he's shooting like similarly from 3 if you just look at like the volume and percentages, but the treatment is just very different. Obviously, one's Steph and one's Anthony Edwards. And I just think his ability to floor raise his team's offense just isn't as strong as what Steph Curry is able to do. This Timberwolves offense, in fact, just hasn't been that great. And I'm willing to give like the out of the spacing is terrible in like most situations, but not when we're comparing him to Steph Curry. Steph Curry is in an even worse offensive situation, and he's able to floor raise that to a level that I don't think Anthony Edwards has shown. And defensively, I think he's taken a step back in terms of what he was in the playoffs. He's right in line with what he's really been in the regular season, which is engagements up and down, but in marquee matchups or when he's on the ball, he can still be a really, really strong defender. But overall, I still don't think he's been like a tremendously positive defender to where I would say that makes up the gap in offense, which I think Steph still has. So that's why I favored Steph. I just think Anthony Edwards just isn't really the offensive player that Steph Curry is, despite the fact that I think the counting numbers might even favor Ant because he's averaging like 26, Steph's averaging like 22. And I know Steph's assists have probably gone down as well. So I just think it's the old thing with Steph. His impact goes beyond the box score, but I really do think it does. So that's why I still favored Steph. He's also leading the league in free throw percentage. So yay, shout out to Steph. But Eastern Conference starters, who do you have starting in the Eastern Conference?
For the Eastern Conference, I have Darius Garland, Jalen Brunson, Jason Tatum, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Karl Anthony Towns. That is my starting lineup. Giannis, once again, being one of the most dominant restricted area players in the NBA, now adding a mid-range jumper to his repertoire and getting a lot better as a defender compared to last season and maybe the year before. I think he's been great. He's also been one of the best. He's also been one of the best transition scorers in the league, if not the best transition scorer in the league over the past multiple seasons. I think he's like third. I would say comfortably third in the MVP race. I wouldn't say he's in the same tier as Jokic and SGA this season anymore. I think SGA and Jokic kind of pulled away, but I definitely think he should have been starting. Jason Tatum, I think he's having a great season. He's still been great defensively. I still don't love the shot diet, but this is something that I think that I'm just probably going to be talking to a wall about for the rest of his career. But Jalen Brunson, again, he's been extremely efficient. And Karl Anthony Towns, a lot of the things I had concerns with Karl Anthony Towns, it looked like the situation was the problem. I mean, when you look at him putting the ball on the floor, it looked like he was very turnover prone when he was doing that. He gave up a lot of charges, things of that nature. But now you have more spacing around him. He has more room to create. He has more counters when he does get in bad situations when he's driving to the rim. His touch around the rim has been solid. He's still been a great 3-point shooter, and I think he's top 3 in the league in rebounds. Yeah, I have Cat here. And as for Darius Garland, I needed to get one Cleveland Cavalier in here. I think there have been 4 Cleveland Cavaliers who've been playing great this season, and Darius Garland's averaging 22 points per game on like 51, 43, 88. His playmaking, his ball handling, him showing to me that he should be the point guard of this team, because I was really campaigning for Donovan Mitchell just to take over those reins. But yeah, he's shown me enough to where he can be a starter this year.
Once again, we agree on 4 names, and the 5th one is where we I have Tatum, Giannis, and Cat. I have Jalen Brunson, but I didn't go with Darius Garland. I went with Damian Lillard.
I can see that.
I think Damian Lillard is having a tremendous year that is going under the radar, because I think a lot of people were just down on Dame after what he did last year. But this year, I do think Damian Lillard is back to a Damian Lillard level. And raw counting numbers, he's averaging 25 a game and 7 assists. He's shooting 38% from 3 on 9 threes a game. His relative true shooting is, if I can find it, bear with me. He is +5 relative true shooting, which is a really, really elite mark, especially for a 6'2" guard. It's actually better than Brunson. It's obviously not better than Garland's, but I mean, Darius Garland is doing some ridiculous things this season as an efficient scorer. But I do think Damian Lillard still has some of the highest gravity in the NBA in terms of when he's coming off pick and rolls. He is dealing with a lot of blitzes and double teams. He is just leading to great offense for everyone around him. He's making guys' lives easier, including Giannis, but Brook Lopez, Taurean Prince, Gary Trent, all benefiting of Damian Lillard's ability to just score the ball from anywhere within 35 feet, really. Defensively, I do think I wouldn't say improved, but I do think he's been more engaged. Now, in comparison to everyone else around him, I do think he's probably the worst defender. But I do think just ultimately not being as much of a negative as he has been in the past is helpful. And I think offensively, I probably think he's either the best or the second best option, him or Jalen Brunson, because Jalen Brunson has improved a lot as a playmaker. For me, he was a shoo-in to start. I didn't feel compelled to have a Cav starting because I knew I was going to have Cavs on the bench.
Yeah.
So for me, it didn't really make much of a difference. I just think Dame has been the best or the second best backcourt player in the Eastern Conference this season. So that's why I went with him. But I definitely do see the Garland's case. If I was to have an Eastern Conference starter in the backcourt from Cleveland, it would be Garland. I do think he's been amazing offensively this year. Just last night, he gave the Rockets 40. But I do just think Dame's just been better. His ability to get to the free throw line has been amazing. He's still one of the elite free throw shooters in the NBA. Like I said, shooting threes. The mid-range stuff has been a lot better than it usually is with Dame, which is nice to see. Yeah, I just think he is more dangerous offensively. That's what it is. I think he's just more dangerous offensively than Darius Garland. So that's why I favored Dame. Do you want to do? Let's do Eastern Conference bench. Let's do Eastern Conference bench. Who do you have coming off the bench in the Eastern Conference?
Off the bench, I have Donovan Mitchell, Cade Cunningham. Now, Zach LaVine was known as a shooting guard for most of his career. He's actually playing small forward this season, so I snuck him in. Jalen Johnson and Evan Mobley. And for my reserves, I have hold on, because I'm reading the scratch offs. I had Donovan Mitchell, Cade Cunningham, Zach LaVine, Jalen Johnson, Evan Mobley, and then I had Trey and Dame as my reserves. There it is.
So you said Mitchell, Dame. Let me just make sure I'm typing this out. Mitchell, Dame. You said Jalen Johnson.
Yep.
Evan Mobley.
Yep.
Who else?
Zach LaVine, Trae Young, and Dame.
Okay. Trey. So 2 Hawks All-Stars. Interesting. Talk to me about the 2 Hawks All-Stars. That's slightly surprising.
I think with the guard situation, I think Trey has to be in there. I think the way he's been able to elevate this offense outside of just the box scores and the efficiency, I still think he's been an above average pick and roll creator. I think he uplifts this offense in ways that sometimes the box score just doesn't show with the pick and roll offense, just spoon feeding his big men and having Jalen Johnson there helping off of him. I think Trae Young has been a big help for this Atlanta Hawks team. And I think just having him on the floor elevates you to an above average offense. And I think he's doing that consistently enough to where he would have to be on this list for me. And as for Jalen Johnson, as for front court players, I do think this spot was kind of weak for the Eastern Conference. I do think Jalen Johnson has been playing at an all-star level. I mean, he's averaging about 21, 9, and 5. He's been a lot better as a ball handler this season, as a playmaker, as a rebounder, as a grab-and-go guy, a guy in transition, a guy as a roller to the rim. I think he's been great. I think there's been a lot of things that he's improved on this season. The jump shot still leaves a little bit to be desired for, but I think he's been great for the Hawks this year.
I couldn't see myself getting 2 Hawks on the All-Star team. I do have Trae Young. So my reserves were obviously Darius Garland, who wasn't in my starting lineup. Donovan Mitchell. I also went with Zach LaVine because he is playing in the front court because they're starting Josh Giddey and Kobe White. So Zach LaVine is a small forward. I went with Evan Mobley. I went with Cade. I went with Trae Young. So we seem to be on the same page there. But my Jalen Johnson replacement was Pascal Siakam. For me, Pascal has been the Pacers' most consistent player this year. I think his ability to attack mismatches has been amazing. He's picking up right where he left off last year in the postseason, where his mid-range attacks have been extremely valuable. He's been elite in isolation. He's still elite in transition. He's shooting the ball really well from 3. He's just been a constant mismatch for the Pacers because you put a big on him, he's too fast, he's too quick, he's getting to the rim. He's got too many counters in the face-up game that he can spin off you. He can just get around you, get to the basket. And then you put smalls on him, he can post you up, he can shoot right over the top. He's really been, in my opinion, the key to that Pacers offense. I understand what Halliburton does in terms of pushing the pace and getting people involved out the pick and roll and doing his lovely no-look passes that people seem to not realize he's just looking at you the whole time. But that's besides the point. I just think I just think Pascal's been the most consistent and the most potent half-court offensive threat for the Pacers, and that's why I went with him. And I favored him over Jalen Johnson because of the half-court advantage. I do
Yeah.
think Jalen Johnson has been much better defensively. I haven't really liked Pascal's defense this year. But I think just offensively, I think the utility that Pascal provides is just at a different level, especially in the half-court. So that's why I favored Pascal slightly. And obviously, people are still quite upset about the LaMelo Ball
I knew it
snub.
was coming.
And I get, like, I understand. I entirely understand. But I guess I'm asking, and this is for people in the chat or people watching afterwards, who has LaMelo been better than for you guys out of Dame, Jalen Brunson, Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Cade, and Trae Young? Because those are the 6 guards we both had. And for me, like, I can see the case for him being better than Trae, maybe. I can see the case for him being better than Cade, maybe. And like, you'd have to be really low on Donovan Mitchell, in my opinion, like, just because of
Seriously
the
low.
regression and stuff, which is something I considered, but
But then
ultimately
again,
I just couldn't get on that side. So like, I need to know who he's been better than and why. Because for me, like, I understand what he's doing, and I think I've watched a lot of Charlotte, like probably too much Charlotte. But I just can't convince myself he's played better than Cade or Trae Young.
yeah, I can't.
Damon Brunson, I think everyone would agree, is off limits. So then it would have to be between the 2 Cavs backcourt guys.
Yeah.
And for me, Garland has just been too good of a playmaker, too efficient of a scorer, too good of a primary ball handler for me to take him out. So like, for me, it's only Donovan Mitchell. And like, I can't convince myself that LaMelo's been better than Donovan Mitchell.
And the thing
Personally.
I do with Donovan Mitchell is I've heard a lot of people say, you know, his points per game is down and he's regressed. But when we look deeper, he's just not getting as much touches as he did last season. Last season, he was getting around 80 touches a game. This year, he's at 60. You know, I think the touches have gone down a lot more. I think the Cavs offense is really focusing on trying to get Evan Mobley to be the best offensive player he possibly can be. And sometimes that has to do with Evan Mobley being the main ball handler, Evan Mobley getting the ball out in transition. Sometimes that takes away from Donovan Mitchell's touches. So that's what I've been looking at when people say like he regressed. But I definitely think that he has a good spot over LaMelo Ball and deserves to be on this list a little bit more than LaMelo Ball.
Yeah, so LaMelo, like I said, would be my first injury replacement. It's just, I feel like there's just been 6 guards who I would take. Some like convincingly, like Damon Brunson. Darius Garland is one who I really don't think is particularly close. Cade, I do favor Cade. We had this conversation last week when someone asked about the star bench cut. Trae, I just think has been too good of a playmaker, and like the offense, I understand he hasn't been particularly efficient, but like surprisingly, I think he's been more efficient than LaMelo. Yes, he has. It's barely, but he has surprisingly been more efficient than LaMelo. And that's with an extremely defensive slanted roster. So offensively, Trae Young is carrying a huge load. Pause, kind of. And he is like, he's been maybe the best passer in the NBA this year, like at least top 3, top 4. Whereas I think LaMelo has been, and it's hard, like I say, it's hard to separate like system from like skill set. It's like LaMelo has been very geared towards scoring, like more so than ever, to the point where I think his playmaking and his passing in particular has like suffered because of it. Like, there's been reads that he used to make that he's not making anymore because he is just so geared towards scoring. And I do think that does hurt his impact somewhat. Whereas I think Trae Young is like balancing his scoring and playmaking at a much higher level than LaMelo is. And I'd also say Trae Young's been better defensively than LaMelo this season. And like, I know neither one of them are
Yeah,
moving the
it's
needle
not a
anywhere.
big, but
Like, but I also think that is kind of just interesting to point out. So that's why I wouldn't have LaMelo, but I definitely understand the case for LaMelo. And I do think, based on the reality of the situation of him being first in fan voting, I do think he should make the All-Star game. But if it was up to me and I was the commissioner of the world and I decided the All-Stars, LaMelo just wouldn't make it personally. So that's that for me. I want to talk a little bit about Zach LaVine because we both had him and we both did our due diligence and made sure he was a front court player. For me, he was a shoo-in. Like, he's just been amazing this year.
Fantastic.
like as a scorer, he's been fantastic. I want to make sure I get the numbers absolutely correct here. So bear with me.
See,
He is averaging. Where are we? He's averaging 25 points per 75 on plus 6.4 relative true shooting. He's been one of the elite shooters in the NBA, one of the elite transition guys, one of the elite cutters. His off-ball game has been amazing, but his on-ball game has also been amazing. He's still a very limited playmaker, very limited. But in terms of offensive proficiency, I think Zach LaVine has been extremely impactful for the Bulls. And in fact, I think they do win while he's out there. Let me go get this courtesy of PBP stats. Zach LaVine has a positive 1 net rating on the season. And without him, the Bulls are a negative 9.4. So they suck. But with him, they are treading water, at least. They are playing like an around 500 team. And a large part of that is because of Zach LaVine's scoring. And he is just one of the better scorers in the NBA, like by any objective measure, that by any subjective measure, all measures, he is just very, very good. And I understand a lot of people haven't watched the Bulls this year, but I do think the narrative of Zach LaVine doesn't play winning basketball is very wrong, very outdated. And I think anyone who watches the Bulls would disagree with the sentiment that he doesn't play winning basketball. There's nothing not winning about an elite off-ball player, an elite catch and shoot guy who can create his own offense and also attack off second side closeouts and all of those things, and is elite in transition and doesn't need ball dominant usage to be effective. There's nothing not winning about that type of player, and that's exactly what Zach LaVine is. So, yeah, Zach LaVine is an all-star for me, and it wasn't really debatable for me.
It wasn't. He was
easy. I wrote him
automatic.
Yeah, he was automatic. A shoe. So,
and
yeah, go ahead.
Zach LaVine, last season with his injuries and his contract and now wanting to get traded to the Pistons, there was a lot of narrative that swung Zach LaVine's way. But this season, as you said, 24 points per game, 51, 45, 81 on 64% true shooting. The only other guard in the NBA to average at least 24 points per game on 64% true shooting is SGA. And over the past month, Zach LaVine's been averaging 28 points per game on 64% true shooting. So upping his volume and keeping the efficiency. He's been 45% as a pull-up three-point shooter, 45% as a catch-and-shoot three-point shooter, 79th percentile pick-and-roll creator, 93rd percentile isolation creator, which is second most in points per possession with the minimum of 2 possessions. So he's been extremely efficient as an off-ball player, as an on-ball player, extremely, extremely, extremely athletic, gets downhill well. He does everything. He does everything you would want as a complimentary scorer. I'm not saying he can go out here and lead you to a conference finals, but saying Zach LaVine doesn't impact winning, saying he's a negative asset, it doesn't matter how long you look at his contract or whether you look at last year's injury history. This is a guy that teams are going to want. Like, if you don't look at the contract, even if you do look at the contract, because I watched the episode where you brought up the other guys in his realm making the same amount of money, Lauri Markkanen, Rudy Gobert, Pascal Siakam, Ant, Kyrie, AD. This is not a spot where Zach LaVine just doesn't belong. Like, I don't see a polar bear. So he could impact a lot of teams. Like, people love the idea of having a complimentary scorer on their team that can play next to a primary playmaker, that can play off ball, can make decisions when he does catch the ball, and can attack closeouts. But it's one sitting in plain sight and nobody wants him. I don't understand that.
Yeah, it's weird. It's very weird to me. I just want to put this out there for anyone wondering. There are 13 players making between $40 and $45 million in the NBA this season. Those players are Rudy Gobert, Anthony Davis, Luka Doncic, Zach LaVine, Trae Young, Fred VanVleet, Anthony Edwards, Tyrese Halliburton, Lauri Markkanen, Pascal Siakam, Kyrie Irving, Domantas Sabonis, and Ben Simmons. If you don't think, based on those players, Zach LaVine is properly paid or is making money right in line with players of his ilk, I would have to just disagree with you. Now, obviously, Anthony Davis and Luka Doncic are worth more than what they are, obviously. Yeah. But then you've also got Ben Simmons, who's making $40 million. You've got Pascal Siakam, who's an all-star for us, $42 million. Lauri Markkanen, who's not an all-star for us, spoiler alert, $42 million. Tyrese Halliburton, $42 million. Anthony Edwards, $42 million. Fred VanVleet, $42 million. Trae Young is making the exact same amount. He's on the exact same contract as Zach LaVine. I think Zach LaVine is making right in line with the players of his tier. So I don't. The issue of the contract just throws me off. I understand it's going to be going on till 2027, but I don't see a world in which Zach LaVine begins regressing. When you shoot as well as he does, when you're as much of an explosive athlete as he is, and when you can play without the ball as well as he does, I don't see the concerns about decline personally. I mean, he was hurt last year and he comes back and he's having one of the best years of his career.
You know what I find so funny? The Warriors didn't want to give up CP3 for Zach LaVine. They didn't want to do it. It's so funny to me. It's so funny to me. But people live and they learn. They live and they learn. Zach LaVine has been one of the best scorers in the league this season, and you can't deny it anymore. You can't deny it anymore. So he definitely deserved to be on this list. I just did a whole video about Zach LaVine. That's why I had those stats just ready. But
he's also doing this with a time of possession lower than Jordan Poole, J-Dub, Steph, Scoot Henderson, Devin Booker, Brandon Ingram when he was playing, Ben Simmons, Tyler Hero, Kyrie, Jalen Green, Donovan Mitchell. Derek White has a larger time of possession than Zach LaVine. Tyus Jones, Scotty Barnes, Jalen Suggs, Jason Tatum, Anthony Simons, Darius Garland, Jamal Murray, Chris Paul, Austin Reeves, Paolo, Ja Morant, Tyrese Halliburton, and then we get into Fred VanVleet, Luka Doncic, Keontae George. Like, his time of possession is really, really low for what he's producing. So, yeah, this turned into Zach LaVine propaganda, and I'm all for it. He's an elite shooting guard, elite small forward for this season in the front court for the Eastern Conference. He's been amazing. And people just aren't paying attention. They have their preconceived notions of him, but he, for me, is a shoo-in as an all-star. Before we get onto the Western Conference reserves, I do want to show what we do have for the Eastern Conference. I may have got this written down wrong, so John D, if I'm wrong, correct me. But gotcha. I believe this is what we have. We have Damian Lillard, Jalen Brunson, Jason Tatum, Giannis, Karl Anthony Towns as our starters, Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Zach LaVine, Pascal Siakam, and Evan Mobley as my reserves. And my two wild cards are Cade Cunningham and Trae Young. And John D, if you want to read yours out, and if it's wrong, I will correct it.
Okay, so for my starting lineup for the Eastern Conference, I have Jalen Brunson, Darius Garland, Jason Tatum, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Karl Anthony Towns. Off the bench, I have Donovan Mitchell, Cade Cunningham. I also have Jalen Johnson, Evan Mobley, and Zach LaVine. And as my wild cards, I have Trae Young and Dame. So yeah, this works.
There we go. I got it absolutely right because I pay attention and I listen. But yeah, that's what we have for our Eastern Conference All-Stars. Now on to our Western Conference All-Stars off the bench. John D, who are your reserves?
My reserves for the Western Conference, I have De'Aaron Fox, Steph Curry, Jaren Jackson Jr., Domantas Sabonis, and Anthony Davis. And as my wild cards, I have LeBron James and Kyrie Irving. As for a couple of guys I want to talk about, Jaren Jackson Jr., I think this season he's gotten a lot better as a scorer with his touch around the rim, with his ball handling. I think it's not where we would want it to be just yet, but I do think he's made some improvements on that end. I do think he's still an excellent help side rim protector. I don't love the post defense, don't love the rebounding, but once again, I do think the Memphis Grizzlies are one of the better rebounding teams in the league, if I'm correct on that. And having Zach Edey next to you, who I think is going to be a really good rebounder, does help. But the improvements he made this year and me kind of siding with him being the best player on that team this season, I had to put him on this team, and I just couldn't get him as a starter. As for Sabonis, I think Sabonis is having a career year, like 21, 14, and 8. With all the turmoil that the Sacramento Kings have been going through, I think he has been the most consistent, and I do think he has been the best player on that team. As for Steph Curry, I just couldn't leave him off the list. Once again, I think you brought it up. The offensive impact that he does provide is still pretty significant, and he is kind of the only life on this Golden State Warriors team. I still think with a solid, competent offense, this could be one of the better offenses in the league. And I think Steph can be the focal point of one of the better offenses in the league still to this day. So I had to keep him on. I had to keep him on this list. And as for AD, he hasn't been playing to the level that you would have wanted him to after seeing the start of the year, but I still think he's been great as a mid-range shooter, as a play finisher. His defense still has been lacking a little bit, but part of that I do blame on the system. But those are my reserves.
Who is the other backcourt reserve? Steph and who?
Steph and De'Aaron Fox.
De'Aaron Fox, thank you. And then you said your wild cards were LeBron and Kyrie.
LeBron and Kyrie.
We'll come back to that. Let me give my reserves, and then we'll get back to that. So I have Anthony Edwards off the bench. I have Kyrie Irving off the bench. I have Anthony Davis, LeBron, and Jaren Jackson as my bench front court. My wild card is Domantas Sabonis, and then my other wild card is James Harden. For me, I could have just had Sabonis as a bench player and then had LeBron or AD as a wild card, but I didn't want to, if I'm being honest. They were all going to make it. I wanted Sabonis.
Yeah, I didn't really pay attention to like.
Yeah, it didn't really make a difference to me, but I just have it listed out as a wild card. But like, it wasn't like, oh, I have LeBron over Sabonis. It was just like, I wrote LeBron's name first, so Sabonis is now in the wild card.
That's it.
And then I guess the disconnect here, we have seemingly the same all-star ballot besides De'Aaron Fox and James Harden. So can you make the case to me why De'Aaron Fox should be over James Harden?
I think James Harden has been like the focal point of this Los Angeles Clippers offense, but I guess maybe the way I'm looking at it is you're kind of like the facilitator for this offense, and I just don't necessarily think that the Clippers offense has been that good to be like, oh my God, James Harden has done this really good job with the Clippers. And on top of Norman Powell contributing the way he has been, him being extremely efficient, him being the consistent 20-point per game type of guy that he's been this season, I don't necessarily think that James Harden is really doing this carrying this extreme load to the way that he is compared to like other guys on this list, other guards on this list. And as for De'Aaron Fox, I still think he puts up the volume. I still think he's having a lot of really good moments this season. I still think he has been playing a really good season. So I took De'Aaron Fox over James Harden for that reason.
I'll make the case for James Harden, and then I guess I'll compare the two. It starts with James Harden is being guarded like he's an MVP. So in terms of defensive attention they're both garnering, I do think James Harden is comfortably dealing with more aggressive coverages than practically anyone in the NBA, but in particular De'Aaron Fox. James Harden is still one of, if not the best statistically, isolation players. I actually want to look up the numbers before I just start lying to the people. So bear with me while I do that. So we saw this. We doing this live on air, so you can see how unprepared I am. Of players with more than three isolation possessions a game, James Harden is third in points per possession, behind Kevin Durant and Zach LaVine, the GOAT, Zach LaVine. But and then if you actually scale that up to players with more than 5 possessions a game, which is a very small sample size of the elite isolation players, James Harden, Jason Tatum, Kyrie, Shea, Zion, Anthony Edwards, and Paolo Banchero, James Harden is the most efficient isolation scorer at 1.09 points per possession. James Harden is still the best, arguably, isolation player in the NBA. I would probably give that tag myself to Shea. But James Harden is just as effective as ever. And then you look at the offensive, like I said, the coverages he's receiving. Guys like Norman Powell are directly benefiting, in my opinion, from James Harden's gravity, ability to draw multiple defenders, his playmaking. I think Zubac is similar in that regard. If you look at Norman Powell, when James Harden isn't on the floor, the efficiency just plummets. Like, it just falls off a cliff, which is not something I hold against him. Like, Norman Powell is a play finisher. Norman Powell is someone who relies on guys like James Harden creating open looks for him. You see the flaws already start to come out when James Harden isn't there, because Norman Powell is asked to create more. You see the tunnel vision start to come out. You see the flaws as a finisher and as a driver and stuff. But overall, I'm just not as, I guess I'm just really high on what I think James Harden is doing offensively. But it is weird because like the offense isn't like, it's not very high level with him, and it's also not plummeting without him. So like, in terms of like the on-off impact, I guess it isn't illustrating what my eyes are telling me, which is this offense pretty much needs James Harden to be coherent, but the numbers suggest otherwise. So that would be like my case against James Harden. It's like, it's not bearing out in the numbers what I'm seeing. And maybe that's just because his overall efficiency isn't great. I think he's at like negative 0.2 true shooting, I think. He's actually at plus 0.2. I guess last night helped. Just at 40 last night. So I guess last night really helped him. But like, I just think offensively he's been amazing. Still one of the best playmakers in the league, still one of the best passers in the league, elite in the pick and roll and elite in isolation, which I think like two of the most valuable forms of elite offense. Especially when you look at the role he's been put in. Whereas I think De'Aaron Fox, it just hasn't been to the same degree. And he's also been much less efficient in a much more offensively sound environment. And he's just not close to the playmaker or passer that James Harden is either. So that's where I struggle. I just think James Harden's been the better scorer, playmaker, and overall offensive player. And De'Aaron Fox hasn't really impressed me with his defense. I think there's times where he can use his hands and make a huge impact. But in terms of consistency, it's just not really moving the needle for me, which is why I didn't have De'Aaron Fox. And for me, I definitely wouldn't have De'Aaron Fox over Devin Booker.
I can see that.
So, yeah, I guess we just disagree on De'Aaron Fox, but I am the same person who had De'Aaron Fox off his top 10 point guards when we did it. What was it, maybe 2 months ago? Now?
I think that top 10, it kind of aged well. It aged well. It looked in question when we had Hallie so high up and he started off the season the way he did, but he's starting to pull it around. I think my Damian Lillard being top 10 or just being number 10, I think that's like aged horribly. But so it ain't just you. It ain't just you.
Let's refresh our memories on what we had on those lists. So when we did top 10 point guards, where is
very first episode of the Hoop Talk podcast season 2.
There we go. Okay. Actually, let me show the people what we had so we can revisit it. We can. Where is it? Okay, let's put this on the screen for everyone. Here we go. This is what we had. We had Luka and Shea 1 and 2. Which I think is still right in terms of they are the top 2 now.
Yeah,
Shea's had the better season. I had Steph at 3. You had Steph at 3. I had Brunson at 4. You had Brunson at 4. Trey at 5. I think Trey at 5 is solid.
Yeah.
I had Dame at 6. So I believed. I was.
Yeah. You were right.
You was not a believer. I had Hallie at 7, which I think started off really bad, but since has really improved. I had Jar at 8. You had Jar at, was that 6?
Yeah, that's 6.
I'm still comfortable with Hallie over Ja Morant. I'm being honest.
Yeah, I'm the more I watch, the more I really just revisit things. I'm starting to lean that way as well. Ja Morant hasn't really impressed me that much this season. I still don't think that he can be the contributor of a high level offense like Halliburton can. And when we look at two guards who are just, I'm going to say that they're just not the biggest positives on defense. What you do to provide to a top level offense is probably what's going to be the thing I look at most when I think about who's better. And I would lean Hallie a little bit more now. Definitely wouldn't have Maxey this high right as of right now. I don't know if Maxey's still in my top 10 as of right now, but I'm going to wait. I'm going to see how he looks with his full roster before I start pulling him out of that stuff. But yeah, it just wasn't the greatest.
I had Maxey at 10 because I was already lower on him, but now I do think I would have Cade Cunningham over him. I do think I would have LaMelo Ball over him. So I do think Maxey would drop out. Does De'Aaron get his way back on the list? I don't know. Maybe I can see De'Aaron. Because I'm going to be honest. Neither of us had Ja Morant as an all-star. And I'm not as high on Ja Morant. I'm just like, I had him at 8, which was already quite low because I remember a lot of people disagreed with me having him at 8. And I had him like the tier below Trey, Dame, and Hallie. Like I didn't think he was really in that conversation.
Yeah.
I'm really concerned about the half court scoring. I'm really concerned about it. I am too. Really concerned about it. So I don't know if I'd move Ja down. I know I would have Cade on the list for sure.
I'd have Cade.
I feel like you kind of have to have LaMelo on the list. So maybe I would move Ja out.
Yeah.
Have Harden at 9 or 10, have LaMelo at 9 or 10, and have Cade at like 8.
Yeah, I definitely think you can make like a case for Cade over Maxey, Fox, maybe even Ja. I know a lot of people love Ja. I'm one of those guys. I still love watching Ja. But then again, it's like I think Darius Garland has put himself in these conversations.
Oh my God, Darius Garland. Oh my, yeah.
Like
We might have to redo this list like after the season, because we might have to redo all our lists after the season, because some point guards have really elevated and some point guards have really
And and to be completely honest, I think I got like some questionable ones throughout this entire video. I mean, throughout this entire top 10 list, like the shooting guard, small. I don't necessarily remember them off the top of my head, but I know I had LeBron over KD. Definitely would push that back. Zion was over Evan.
I mean, I had all of them over Jason Tatum. I had Jason Tatum at 5 on power forward list. I was wrong. Well, it was based on last season, so I still think I was probably wrong. I've become higher on Jason Tatum in recent times. But anyway, let me actually show the people our Western Conference All-Stars. We started rambling about point guards in the NBA. Welcome to the HoopTalk podcast. I'm gonna read off mine and then you read off yours. Let me know if I got anything wrong. I have SGA starting with Steph, Wemby, Kevin Durant, and Jokic. Off the bench, I have Anthony Edwards, Kyrie Irving, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, Jaren Jackson Jr., James Harden, and Domantas Sabonis. And you have?
I have SGA, Anthony Edwards, Victor Wembanyama, Kevin Durant, and Nikola Jokic as my starting lineup. Off the bench, I have De'Aaron Fox, Steph Curry, Domantas Sabonis, Anthony Davis, and Jaren Jackson Jr. And as my wild cards, I have LeBron James and Kyrie Irving.
There we go. That is not too bad. Not too bad. We do have some super chats, and then I just want to talk about some other players if we have time.
Yeah.
Cheese said, Amen FC, we up. Have you seen Amen Thompson recently?
Of course. I love watching the Rockets.
Do you think he can be an all-star next year?
I think there's not a real limit to his ceiling that people are kind of just putting on him. I think when we get prospects like Amen Thompson, extremely athletic, good defender, people put a limit on him or like a ceiling on him to where it's like, this is going to be a great rotational guy, somebody you're going to want to have on your team for years to come. But in the end of the day, I still think his ball handling can get a lot better. Sometimes he just loses the ball in the open floor or just driving to the rim. I think him as a cutter is really solid. I think he could be a great role man. I do think the pressure he puts on the rim, people are legitimately backpedaling to the way that they could lose their footing, and Amen really does capitalize on situations like that really well, to where I think that he can be an all-star. Now, with this talent pool next season, I don't know. Like, I wouldn't put any money on that as of right now, but I do think there is an all-star level that Amen can reach, and I don't think it's wrong to say that he could be the best player for the Rockets as currently constructed.
I'm gonna jump off even bigger cliff. I think he's the Rockets' best player right now.
I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming.
I think in the half court offensively, he's obviously not going to be an advantage creator. That's not what he's going to be, because of the lack of a functional handle and because of the lack of real scoring gravity beyond downhill. He's going to need guys like Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun to be the main advantage creators on the team, which I think they are. I think Jalen Green on the perimeter is Houston's biggest advantage creator. You look at how teams load up to him on his drives, and he's actually become a lot better decision maker in the last month or so, which is very nice to see. And Alperen Sengun is constantly being doubled in the post or on his face-ups, and he's seeing extra help and all of those things. But the way Amen Thompson plays off of those advantages is like, it's like Aaron Gordon on steroids, in my opinion. Like, he plays the baselines and the dunker spots so well. He's such an elite cutter. He's a better offensive rebounder. And like, even last night, I don't know if you watched the Cleveland game, Amen Thompson like single-handedly broke Cleveland's zone. The zone that like stifled the Rockets offense in the previous game, they put Amen Thompson in the middle of that zone. He dissected it. He made the right reads. He's just so athletic. He's able to still get to the rim in one dribble. And it's like, that utility offensively is so useful that I think even though he's not an advantage creator in the half court, I still think he can be one of, if not the most impactful offensive player on the Rockets. Now, right now, I don't think he is. I think he's our third most impactful offensive player. Maybe fourth, because Fred VanVleet is actually pretty good. So third or fourth most impactful offensive player. But defensively, I think I had him on my all-defensive second team.
Yeah, we both had one of the.
If I did, I was wrong. He's a first-team all-league defender. He has to be. He might be one of the 5 best defenders in the NBA. the job he's done on Donovan Mitchell in back-to-back games was amazing. He then switches on to Evan Mobley and just stifles him, blocks his shot head up in the post. His switchability is amazing. He then blocked George Niang's shot so disrespectfully. It was ridiculous. So he's got the rim protection instincts that he didn't really have last year, but this year he's really improved in that regard. He's been improved as a post defender. He's one of the best on-ball defenders in the NBA. Like, I don't really see a defensive flaw. Like last year, he was a bit too jumpy. He was a bit too aggressive, so he got caught on up fakes. Now he's staying extremely disciplined, but he still jumps off the floor so quick that he's still able to alter shots in a way that not many can. And I'm looking at this right now. I did have on my all defensive second team, Amen Thompson. Damn. Yeah, he would be on my first team. I don't know who I'm taking out. Draymond Green, you got to go. I'm sorry. Someone has to come out.
Somebody has to go.
Taking out Draymond Green. Amen has been amazing. So I do think he could be an all-star next year. And I do think he is the Rockets' most impactful player right now, despite not being the Rockets' most impactful offensive player. So, yeah, that's how high I am on Amen Thompson. And Justin followed that up with a super chat regarding Amen Thompson. Said, I ain't been watching yet, but when I watch later at work, Amen and Franz better be all-stars or I'm a riot. It sounds like Justin's going to be rioting. Those are some of the realest hoops this season. Did you see Demon Amen last night? And Franz's fourth quarter. Franz started 1 for 12.
And then like it was bad. It was bad. I'm like, man, we gotta let him rest a little more. Let him rest just a little bit more. we rushing it. But he actually pulled it together, which is happy to see. And I wanted to talk to you about another Magic. Is it just me, or are we kind of like seeing Paolo just kind of go away from what's been working?
Paolo's regressing back to what he was doing last year, and I'm upset.
And it's really because Paolo is literally when I have favorite players in the NBA, I kind of scout who's going to be my next favorite player after my favorite player retires. So LeBron's on his way out the door. I'm kind of grooming Paolo to be my next favorite player, and it's pissing me off. I think I got the stats somewhere. Hold on, because once again, we don't be prepared as much over at the Hoop Talk podcast. We be scattered everywhere. But I think in January, he's taken throughout the entire month of January, he's taken about 40 shots in the restricted area and 40 shots in the mid range. Over his stretch in October, it was about 40 shots in the restricted area to 15 shots in the mid range. Paolo Banchero has been so good at just creating mismatches and being more physical than a lot of people guarding him and just finishing around the rim through contact. And now it's like he's settling for a lot of those things. Now, I don't necessarily know how much I want to put on this I don't necessarily know how much of this is the situation, because right now I think the Magic are 29th in half court points per possession, and they're like half court. They're like 28th in half court points per play. So maybe he's trying to be the spacer, and he's trying to be the guy that provides some level of spacing. So guys like Jalen Suggs, guys like Wendell Carter don't have to sit on the perimeter, because they're legitimately not guarding Wendell Carter Jr. He's sitting at the perimeter and he's just holding the ball and he's looking around. That's all he's doing on the perimeter. So maybe he wants to be the guy that stretches the floor to 16, 17 feet. But damn that. You are supposed to be the best player on this team. You are supposed to be the best player on this team. You're just not attacking the rim as much as I would like. And you were so good when you were attacking the rim. It was so good. I thought, Paul, I was going to push some nasty agendas. Like, I thought it was that season. But I don't want to overreact. This is something I'm going to monitor closely and see how things work out before I make a video about it. But I'm going to keep my eye on it.
Yeah, I'm not going to say I'm disappointed, because he did just come back. So maybe it is some just caution with being as physical as he was early on in the season, which I can understand. But the regression, well, I'm going to call it a regression for now, but I'm also acknowledging that it could just be due to situation of just coming back from injury, but it's still a regression of what he was the first 5 or so games. The concerns I have with Paolo is if this isn't just something about being precautionary based on the injury he was dealing with, do you think the lack of a functional, his handle is great for someone his size.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, if he's going to drive as much as I think he should to really maximize himself, his handle is not good enough. Do you think that ultimately puts a ceiling on how good he can be offensively if he struggles dealing with teams helping off like the strong side and in the gaps and at the nail. And teams do that a lot because Orlando lacks spacing.
Yeah.
And that means he ultimately ends up picking up his dribble. He settles for mid-range jumpers because he can't get all the way to the rim. If he can't figure that out, or Orlando can't get enough spacing around him, do you think there's a ceiling on Paolo's offensive game? And is that ceiling lower than it doesn't have to be a Franz Wagner, but is that lower than, I guess, what you would have hoped with Paolo Banchero?
I do necessarily think that he does not have the handle to really create the pressure on the rim as of right now. But I also do think even with the situation that he's in, that they can create better looks for him. I think Paolo Banchero could play really good within the middle of the inside the arc around the free throw line to where he can post up or have a face up game. He does have a pretty decent shot from that range as well, to where he can kind of shorten those dribbles and just take a step back from as many dribbles, because sometimes when you see him drive to the rim, he's all the way out the 3-point line. If you can move him within the middle of the floor and him make decisions for the offense, I think that would be a lot better. You would just take away some of the dribbles he takes to get to the rim. Maybe it takes him 5 dribbles to really create and get downhill, and now it's about 2 with a spin move or something. I think his footwork has gotten a lot better. So I think it's just his positioning when he does not have the ball. Sometimes I see him catch the ball all the way out to the 3-point line, and now you're really forced to create on the perimeter, and that may lead to a lot of pull-up mid-range shots that he does love a lot. But if you could just get the ball in the middle, face up, make one move, dribble once or twice, and get to the rim, or just settle for the short mid-range shot every now and then, I think that would be a lot better, to where if you do have spacing around, it's going to be a lot easier. But even without having spacing, I think Jalen Suggs cuts to the basket really well. I think Franz Wagner is a good cutter, and he's a good player in he's a good pick and roll creator. So where you could run a 2-man game between Franz and Paolo as well to kind of get that full head of steam against maybe smaller matchups. So I think it's just where he positions himself off the ball, because I think right now they're looking at Paolo like he's going to be the main creator on the perimeter, and you have somebody for that. Paolo Banchero is physical enough, he's big enough to where he can live from the free throw line in. And he can also set screens for Franz. Franz can be the main pick and roll ball handler. He can create for the offense. Paolo can focus on making decisions out the short roll, having a face-up game in the post, getting to the block, and being more physical around the rim. So I don't necessarily think it's just the spacing. I think sometimes his spacing isn't the best in his position off the ball. So if he could work on that, I think that'd be a lot better.
Also, shout out to Franz for coming back, and it's hard for me to say he looked good last night because the first 3 quarters happens, but
Yeah.
the fourth quarter was great. So shout out to Franz for that fourth quarter, ultimately getting the win. And I will say, if Paolo regresses back to more of what he was last year, and he's still shooting 65% from the line, like that's not ticking up, and it's I'm concerned. Like I'm gonna keep saying it, and hopefully someone who's working with him tells him, widen your base on your free throws, please. I will be back on Franz is the Magic's best player. I just will. I think Franz has been amazing. The growth he's taken as a playmaker. The 3-point shot seems to be coming back for him, which is great. And I think just everything he does away from the basketball, as a cutter, as a spot-up guy, as someone who makes quicker decisions. And then he's also just so good of a finisher and so good of a driver. And he's able to get there more consistently than Paolo has in the last couple games. I think that just opens up the floor for Franz to be once again Orlando's best player. Although he'll never get recognized as such, but I do think that's what this is opening up to be. But once again, I don't think it matters who their best player is, as long as they're both playing together.
Yeah, because they're great.
Like who's the best is really an unimportant conversation. But I do think it would be Franz if this is a true regression from Paolo. But with that being said, we do have one more super chat from Fence Jones, who said the Warriors haven't learned anything. I think this is where we'll end it with the Warriors. We'll talk about the Warriors in a little bit.
Yeah.
I can't even ask if you're concerned about the Warriors. I think they are what they are at this point.
Yeah, I'm not.
Is there anything they can do? Is there anything they can do? Or is it just, it's over?
Well, I saw what Phoenix did with Utah, traded their 2031 or 2030 pick, either one of those, to get more first-round picks. I didn't hate that, because in the end of the day, you are in a situation where you have aging superstar, and you want to try and build the best roster around him. And I've heard rumors about Steph, Draymond, and Steve Kerr saying we want to leave this franchise with a future, a bright future, this, that, and the third. The Warriors weren't much before Steph got there, and before Steph started winning with Draymond and Steve Kerr and all those things. It does not matter about what it looks like after Steph leaves, because who knows if your franchise is going to get a player at the level of Steph ever again, or within the next 20 years. You try and build as much as you possibly can. You owe it to Steph Curry, the guy has won you 4 championships, has won 2 MVPs, to build a competent team. I'm not saying you need to swing for the fence and now Jimmy Butler's linked to the Warriors again and all that. I'm just saying be a 6 seed. Give Memphis a run for their money in the first round. Build for something. I want to see Steph in the playoffs. And it's very aggravating because now you kind of made B-Pods and Jonathan Kuminga untouchable over the offseason. And now that's kind of backfired. And you could have got Zach LaVine. I don't know how true the Lauri Markkanen rumors were, but I know you could have got Zach LaVine, and that could have really helped this Warriors team. But at this point, I'm just like, you know what? If they're saying they're probably just going to ride into the sunset and be 39-43 over the next 2 or 3 seasons, then I don't have high expectations on them.
Yeah, I think obviously the championship windows are over. I think we can all accept that. I don't think there's a trade that really moves the needle for them. Like defensively, they've been falling off recently. So like it wasn't like they were just struggling offensively. Now the defense is really starting to struggle. They have no legitimate size, like at all. Buddy Hield is Buddy Hielding. Steph needs someone who can take pressure off, handle the ball, create advantages. They don't have that. And I know a lot of like Warriors fans are talking about Vucevic. I think someone in the chat just said Vucevic. He might be the worst defensive big in the NBA. Like, I don't think a contender wants Nikola Vucevic, because I think you have to. And this is the same problem that Dennis Schroeder was. And this is not a knock on Dennis Schroeder as a player. It's not a knock on Vucevic as a player. People, I think, need to stop looking at the numbers people put up in non-winning situations and assume that that player will replicate that in a winning environment. This is why I try to look at play styles and how people are playing and not just the numbers. Like when Jeremy Grant was on the Pistons averaging 20, that's not the same as what Zach LaVine is doing right now because of the way they're being utilized in their skill sets. So like, I'm not a big believer in the empty stats moniker, but what I am a believer is in players on bad teams playing really well. How does what they do translate to playing winning basketball? Cam Johnson is a major asset to me because of the way he plays and how that affects winning basketball. Dennis Schroeder was someone who was running an offense. He wasn't going to do that on the Warriors. It was very obvious he wasn't going to do that on the Warriors. Dennis Schroeder was someone who was running 14 pick and rolls of possession. Hyperbolic. But if there wasn't an advantage on the first pick and roll, they just reset it back to Dennis Schroeder for another pick and roll. That obviously wasn't going to happen on the Warriors. So when you look at Dennis Schroeder averaging 19 and 7 or whatever he was averaging in Brooklyn, it was very obvious that wasn't going to be the case in Golden State, because Golden State moved the ball quicker. You play more off the ball. You're not going to reset the possession to Dennis Schroeder. So Dennis Schroeder is just not going to be able to have the opportunity to do what he was doing in Brooklyn. So you have to think about how his play style changes in those type of situations, which is why I think Zach LaVine is like a perfect asset for a lot of these contenders, because he can mold into many different situations, more off the ball, more on the ball, self-creation, transition. Like his offense just fits. Dennis Schroeder was one who doesn't. Nikola Vucevic is similar. How many post-ups are you giving Nikola Vucevic? How many times are you going to give Nikola Vucevic free throw line jumpers or face-ups or shots in that regard? And then are those shots going to be worth what you're giving back on defense for a championship team? That's what I don't know. Me personally, no. The answer is always going to be no. Nikola Vucevic doesn't give you enough offensively to justify what he's going to give back defensively. Now, Nikola Jokic, yes.
Yeah, you said Jokic twice.
Okay, Nikola Vucevic doesn't make up for his bad defense offensively. Nikola Jokic does. So it's about the player in which you are and how that translates to a better situation or a more competitive situation, which you could even argue our Golden State even a competitive situation at this point. But I don't think that's the right trade. I think the right trade was Zach LaVine. Chris Paul's expiring for Zach LaVine.
It was
just made
right
perfect
there.
sense.
It was right there.
But now I don't know what's available for them. But if they aren't going to make a move, then they are just wasting the last of Steph and Draymond and whatever the case may be instead, and opting with Brandon Pajimski and Jonathan Kuminga, which, hey, to each their own. But personally, I think it's disappointing to see the Warriors fall off the way they have. They are now the 11th seed. I really see no world in which they make a playoff push. I think even if they make the play-in, they're going to lose. And if they make the first round, unless they play the Rockets, I think they lose. Because the Warriors and the Rockets just seems to be a bad matchup for the Rockets. But yeah, if I was a Warriors fan, I'd be quite upset. That's what I'll say. I'll be quite upset. I just don't think there's anything really positive going on. I don't think Kuminga is a very, very good young player. I definitely don't think Pajimski is, and I was really high on Pajimski coming in, but I just don't like what I've seen. Moses Moody, I think, is actually a pretty solid role player. He just seems to not get enough minutes. TJD can't make layups, so that's disappointing. It's just bad. Yeah, it's a bad time to be a Warriors fan, but you've had so many good times. You guys can live
man. Like,
you guys can live through the bad
times.
Well.
But
we have no more super chats. We've given our all stars. Actually, let me just make sure we read through it one more time, just so everyone who joined late may not have seen it. Where are we? Here we are. Let me just make sure I've got this all set up. Okay, so here is what we had for our Eastern Conference All Stars. I had Damian Lillard, Jalen Brunson, Jason Tatum, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Karl Anthony Towns, Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Zach LaVine, Pascal Siakam, Evan Mobley, Cade Cunningham, and Trae Young. And my toughest cut was LaMelo. And John D, you had?
I had Jalen Brunson, Darius Garland, Jason Tatum, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Karl Anthony Towns, with Donovan Mitchell, Cade Cunningham, Jalen Johnson, Evan Mobley, Zach LaVine, Trae Young, and Damian Lillard coming off the bench.
And in the West, I had SGA, Steph Curry, Victor Wembanyama, Kevin Durant, Nikola Jokic, Anthony Edwards, Kyrie Irving, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, Jaren Jackson Jr., James Harden, and Domantas Sabonis, with Devin Booker being my toughest cut. And John D, you had?
I had SGA, Anthony Edwards, Victor Wembanyama, Kevin Durant, Nikola Jokic, De'Aaron Fox off the bench, Steph Curry, Domantas Sabonis, Anthony Davis, Jaren Jackson Jr., with my wildcards being LeBron James and Kyrie Irving.
There we go. That is what we had. Before we get out of here, John D, where can everyone find you?
One thing before we finish up. I did make the 8-man rosters for the 3 pickup teams. Just want to read them out real quick. I tried to make it as competitive as possible. So if you want to just listen and think which team would win, just throw it out there. The Rising Stars, I have Amen, Brandon Miller, Asor, Rob Dillingham, Khalil Ware, Bilal Coulibaly, Alex Sarr, and Dalton Connect. I picked Dalton Connect because there's some.
Brandon Miller's out for the season. Just
there it is. Okay, so he can be replaced by Stephon Castle. Perfect. As far as that, for the first team, SGA, Darius Garland, Jason Tatum, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Anthony Davis. And off the bench, there's Donovan Mitchell, Damian Lillard, and Jalen Brunson. For the second, no, that's Jalen Johnson. That's on me. But the second team is Jalen Brunson, Ant, Zach LaVine, Wemby, Cat, Cade, and Trae. And the third team is kind of like the nostalgia team with Steph, Kyrie, LeBron, KD, Jokic, Jaren Jackson Jr., De'Aaron Fox, and Evan Mobley.
The nostalgia team. Obviously, I'm picking a team with the Rocket on it, so Amen Thompson going to carry them to victory as he does. But yeah, that's actually interesting. I probably should have done that. But with Charles Barkley and Shaq and Kenny drafting, I mean, they're just gonna do whatever they want.
Yeah, they're just going. Yeah.
Yeah, where can everyone find you?
Everyone can find me over at the Buzzer Sports. Doing a lot of things differently on my channel now. I'm going to be starting my own personal podcast back up again because it's been very inconsistent over the past 6 months since it's been a thing. It'd be like one episode every week and a half, every 2 weeks. But I'm gonna try and do it twice a week, every Monday and Friday. Also gonna be starting post-game reactions, live post-game reactions on my YouTube channel, possibly after the All-Star break. That's something I want to get a little bit more consistent towards playoff time. And the draft content is going to be very consistent. It has been very consistent ever since the 2024 draft ended. So just consistent videos 5 to 6 times a week over at the Buzzer Sports.
John D's link is in the description as always. You'll find me on Player's Choice and here. I did run the community poll asking how often you guys wanted to see us reacting to your takes. You guys overwhelmingly said once a week. To the point where I couldn't even act like it was a close race to where we could just do it once every 2 weeks or so. Shout out to the 2% of you who said never again. Shout out to you. You guys are real ones. But yeah, once a week, we will aim for once a week. For as much as you guys support the show and give us takes and all of the above, I think that will probably just make it more likely to be a once a week thing. But so next week we'll see. But the plan is to do it again next week, but I can't guarantee anything. But keep an eye out for that. Obviously, Hoop Talk podcast every Sunday. Once again, you can find John D over at the Buzzer Sports. All links that you may be interested in are in the description. I want to thank you guys for watching. I want to thank you guys for supporting the show. We are now 13 episodes in, and you guys still commenting, liking, sending super chats. I appreciate all of that. I'm not going to say you guys are motivating me to keep doing this, because if I'm being honest, you're not. But we're doing it. So we're getting through it. I am having more fun than I thought I would, especially 13 episodes in. So that's been cool. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Merry Christmas. I will see you guys tomorrow. John D will see you guys. When will you see everyone?
I'll be on PC this Wednesday. Hopefully we get another hot takes video. Once again, we're gonna try and do as much as we possibly can with that. So you guys will possibly see me on Wednesday.
There you go, Wednesday. But thank you guys for watching. Merry Christmas. Leave a comment of who you guys have in the All-Star game. And leave some hot takes in the comments. I don't know if we'll react to them from this comment section or from the community poll or wherever, but leave some of your takes. I read all the comments anyway. I'm sure John D reads some comments. So yeah, I'll see you guys tomorrow.